Welcome back to the Sunny Stampin' Studio. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to do this fun Halloween card. To create the main image, I use Stampin' Up's Jumbo Stampin Around wheel. So I'm going to show you now how I set that up. You're going to want to grab a scrap of grid paper, like this, and on it you can see I have stuck a 2" by 5.5" piece of Whisper White cardstock. I used Dotto adhesive on the back and then stuck it down to the grid paper and aligned it with one of the lines on the grid paper. You now need a basic black ink pad and your jumbo handle with your wheel inserted. Now normally when you're wheeling, if you have a large surface to wheel, such as a scrapbook page, you would want to insert a self-inking cartridge inside. Because we're just going to be wheeling a relatively short area, so 5.5 inches, we don't need the self-inking cartridge, we can use an ink pad. Now you notice if you look at the stamp that this is quite a solid image stamp, so you want to make sure it gets inked up very well. So make sure that your ink pad itself is very juicy before you're doing this. Now I made sure to ink up my basic black ink pad with some Stampin' Refill before I started, just to make sure there was a really good amount of ink on it. Now grab your wheel, start at the bottom of your ink pad and wheel it upwards. You don't want to wheel back and forth like this because then you'll just ink up one particular area of the wheel rather than the whole thing. So just start at the bottom, go to the top a few times, and once you've done that, you can turn your ink pad sideways and then go the other way. I find that doing it in both directions helps eliminate any streak lines or funny lines that may show up on the image. So once you're satisfied that your wheel is inked up very well, you now want to very carefully put your fingers on the side of the wheel and turn it until you find the seam. And you can see, I'll hold this a bit closer to the camera, you can see the seam right there. Now, as you're stamping, you want to make sure that the seam starts off the edge of the paper. So I'm going to position the seam just in front of my paper, and then I'm very carefully going to apply even pressure and wheel all the way up my cardstock, like so. So you can now see that you have your image wheeled onto your cardstock. So once you've done that, you can set this aside to dry. Now just to save time, I've already gone ahead and pre-prepared a piece, which I then took and matted onto a 2¼ by 5.5" piece of Elegant Eggplant cardstock. So I'm going to set that aside for a moment. I'm going to grab my old olive card base because we're going to be needing this in just a few moments. This was a 4½ by 11" piece of cardstock, which I folded in half to create a 4¼ by 11" card. Sorry, I'm not sure what dimension I mentioned, but it's 4¼ by 11 inches, which you fold in half to create a 4¼ by 5.5" card. You're going to need 5 circles punched out of the Cast a Spell Designer Series paper, which you're going to align one on top of the other. Once you've done that, you want to grab a foam mat. You want to place these onto the foam mat, still keeping them one on top of each other, and then pierce a hole straight through them about 1/4 inch up from the bottom, or just a little bit less than 1/4 inch. You can see like that. Once you've done that, you want to take black brads from the Vintage Brads collection and insert one into each of the holes. So as you can see, I've already gone ahead and done that. Using a little bit of snail adhesive on the back, you want to start sticking these along the bottom edge of your card, like so. So I'm aligning it with the left edge right now and with the bottom edge. Now I already have some snail adhesive on the back of these, which is why you don't see me putting some on right now. Now as you can see, as I'm putting these circles on, I'm overlapping them. The other thing that I'm trying to do is trying to make sure that the black brad ends up at the bottom and that I turn the prongs so that they don't stick out at all. And there you see. So you've got all your circles aligned along the bottom. Next thing you're going to want to do is to grab a piece of Cast a Spell Designer Series paper. This is 1¼ inches by 5.5 inches, and I have a 7" piece of Elegant Eggplant Grosgrain ribbon that's 1/4 inch wide. So I'm going to put some snail adhesive at the ends of my designer paper, and I'm going to wrap my ribbon around it. And you just want to make sure as you're doing this that you don't pull the ribbon too tight, otherwise it will warp your paper a little bit. Once you've done that, you can now go ahead and put snail adhesive all along the bottom edge of this, as well as some along the top, like that. I'm now going to just align my card base with the lines on my grid paper and hold it in place using my fingers as I position my designer paper onto my circles. And I am putting it not quite 3/4 of an inch up, like so. Next thing I'm going to do is to grab my matted image, put some snail on the back. Once again, line up my card with my grid paper, and then I'm going to align this so that it is about 1/4 inch down from the top, like so. Okay, so let's put that aside and we can now get ready to do the greeting. Grab yourself a scrap of Whisper White cardstock, and I have this stamp, which is from the Eat, Drink, and Be Scary stamp set. I've inked it up in basic gray, classic ink, and as you can see, I'm stamping it twice, one on top of the other, onto my piece of Whisper White cardstock. Now once you've done that, you can go ahead and use your designer label punch to punch it out. I'm now going to take a pair of fine tip tweezers, some 2-way glue, and some die cut letters that I punched out of the one of Stampin' Up's dies, which at the moment I can't remember what it's called, but I will write it on the screen for you after when I edit the video. So using my tweezers, I'm very carefully picking up my letters, and I'm putting some 2-way glue on them. And then I'm sticking them onto that designer label which I punched. Now the only reason that I'm doing this upside down is just because of the position in which I have my tweezers. It makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so you've got your boo stuck on there. You now want to grab your 1 3/8 inch circle punch, and you want to punch a circle out of basic black cardstock, and then you want to center and mat your label piece on there like so. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and put a Stampin' Dimensional at the top and at the bottom. I didn't put any in the middle because this is going to be straddling the ribbon, so I want the dimensionals to stick to my cardstock and not to my ribbon. So you can now grab your card, and then it's simply a matter of positioning your greeting piece onto your card and sticking it down. And you're done. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I look forward to stamping with you again.